Hey, came through! Knew I could count on you. Let me just take a look at this. This is in excellent condition. You're a lifesaver.
Oh, thanks.
Here, have a gun.
As someone who's put hundreds of hours into the first Death Stranding, there were 3 things that I found to be the weakest aspects of the game that I did not think could be fixed in the sequel. The vehicles, the combat, and the story. I was wrong about 2 of those things. In the first game, I was all about walking, or running, mostly about being on foot. I loved engaging with the mechanics of cargo management, balancing, and navigating the terrain. For me, getting into a vehicle meant skipping over the main point of the game. I wouldn't even use carriers for the most part, unless I was riding them down a mountain. And forget about roads. I hated to see a road in Death Stranding. Oh, so I get to hold the left stick forward, avoid hazardous areas, and completely ignore all the cool traversal mechanics? Yeah, sounds awesome. And that was my attitude for the first stretch of Death Stranding too. But eventually I was introduced to the new trike. And while I assumed it would be basically identical to the trike from the first game, I decided to give it a go. And it was a bit of a gateway moment. I wasn't instantly converted to the vehicular faith, but this set the wheels in motion. For one thing, the vehicles in DS2 control better. They're still not perfect by any means, but to me they just seem to handle a lot better than in the first game. But maybe even more importantly, the environments seem more suited for vehicles this time around. It seemed to me that DS2 generally had more stretches of relatively flat land for you to cross compared to the first game. This varies by location, of course, but I'm speaking generally. For me, walking in Death Stranding is enhanced by frequent changes and obstacles in the environment. And so seeing this big stretch of flat land in Mexico made me feel like vehicles may have some use after all. So I started alternating between traveling on foot and using trikes and trucks. And that was good for a while, but at some point I found myself wanting something more. There was an itch that wasn't being scratched. Something was missing. And then it happened. I made a delivery to this mechanic and he gave me the schematics for something called a coffin board. I rolled my eyes a bit at this incredibly Kojima concept, but once I took it out for a spin, I instantly fell in love. Any reservations I had about the use of transportation were out the window because this thing is sick.
Hell yeah.
Now, are there changes I would make to it? Yes. I mean, it's too big to me and I don't like that you can't carry it at all and the handling isn't perfect, but even so, I was hooked on this thing. The only reasons I would really get off of it would be cases where it wouldn't cross the terrain or the game prevented me from using it, like when I went into areas with no network connection. And in the case of terrain, there really aren't many times when it won't get you where you need to go, especially since it travels over tar and water. In fact, it actually goes faster over tar and water. I cannot describe to you how good it feels to rip through the water on this thing. Soaring down a river is just gorgeous. And speaking of gorgeous, the visuals in this game are yet another thing that made me appreciate vehicles and even roads. You see, the first game took place almost entirely in midday with overcast skies or rain. DS2 introduced dynamic time of day and allowed for a little more sunshine. This does a lot for me in terms of varying up the scenery. And let me tell you, this game at night in the rain, it just hits, especially on the road. I just love the way the lights in this game shine at night. Cruising through the late night in the rain is a pure vibe. Hell, I'll literally let the game play itself. There's an A-Pass enhancement that will let you put vehicles on autopilot when you're on a road. There's even a button for dynamic camera angles. It's really perfect for throwing on some tunes and just getting lost in it. There have also been enhancements for trucks, and while I'm still not much of a truck guy, I can see the appeal of the new upgrades. I mean, traveling around with mounted cannons and/or electrical rockets is pretty sick. And this leads me into the combat. Now, I was of the mind that the first game didn't really need combat. I found the weapons to be mostly uninteresting from a gameplay perspective, and the fact that you could fight mules and bosses almost felt obligatory. Like the game needed to have combat or else it wouldn't be considered a real video game. I would have been perfectly fine with the developers ditching combat entirely for the sequel, but ultimately they doubled down. They expanded Sam's arsenal, introduced more interesting enemies and bosses, and made a number of tweaks to make combat tighter and more dynamic overall. I'm going to throw down a spoiler warning here in case you want to discover all the weapons and mechanics for yourself. So let's start with the bosses. They're just so much cooler overall. The new giant BTs are so diverse and so visually creative. I'm a big fan of the riot type personally, and maybe some of the massive ones aren't all that mechanically intricate, but it's hard not to get swept up in the scale and grandeur. I'm reminded of Shadow of the Colossus in some ways. Even the Nirvana segments, which I was dreading based on my experience with Cliff's segments in the last game, were much more enjoyable than I expected. It's hard to say exactly why. I think it's a combination of things like the overall combat being more finely tuned, creative environmental mechanics and set pieces, and I think Neil's encounters are a little less punishing than Cliff's. Even some of the encounters with non-boss enemies can be pretty exciting thanks to things like narrative framing, the set pieces I just mentioned, and the new enemy type. I'm a big fan of the ghost mechs. They've all just got such cool designs, and they're fairly intimidating forces to be reckoned with, especially the coffin types. I was legitimately worried the first time I encountered one of these things. There's also a boss ghost mech that is very cool, but unfortunately gets reused a couple times, making it a little less special. But let's circle back to the giant BTs. One of my favorite additions to the combat is the ability to capture these beasts and then summon them at will like some kind of kaiju Pokemon. It would be nice if you could summon them outside of the BT battles, but I'm not gonna look a gift horse in the mouth because this shit is really cool. I'm not sure I really have much more to say about it. The concept is pretty simple, but it's kind of genius at the same time. Same goes for the ability to take off your backpack, lighten your load, keep your cargo safe, and look damn good doing it. Plus, it adds a whole new layer of loadout strategy. You've removed your back storage, but you've got side straps, your tool rack, grenade pouches, and the new pistol holster at your disposal to create a loadout that will get you through a given encounter. And then there's all the new toys that they give you. Something I had specifically hoped for in this game, given that there was definitely still going to be combat, was a more interesting selection of weapons and abilities. And Kojima Productions did not disappoint. You've got things like the rocket box and the blood boomerang, which may not be the most mechanically unique video game weapons, but they at least get you away from the regular old point and shoot weapons or lobbing grenades. And they can be pretty fun to use, the rocket box especially. But unquestionably, the best addition to Sam's arsenal is the battle guitar. This thing is the perfect mix of Kojima goofiness and a surprising kind of badass flair. It's not every day you play a game that lets you noodle on an electric guitar to charge up an arcane crystal beam to deal damage to a large abyssal beast. That's pretty damn metal. And it sounds like the kind of thing that would normally be reserved for a cutscene, but you can just do it whenever. Beyond the ranged attack, you can also use this thing as an axe, which has its own kind of satisfaction. Koji Pro has actually done quite a bit to expand melee combat, adding multiple weapons and even unarmed martial arts moves. And in case that wasn't enough, they threw in a Kamehameha wave. And this isn't even an exhaustive list. There's probably some stuff I still don't know about. Now, I will say that the melee combat does leave something to be desired. It's very animation heavy. Lots of wind up and jockeying into position to land a hit and then long recovery animations. It can still be fun, but it doesn't feel as tight as using ranged weapons, and I don't find myself using these pizza foo moves as much as I'd like to, cool as they are. But the wild thing about these martial arts moves is that they're entirely optional and missable. If you don't engage with the pizza chef and stumble upon his item in the nearby encampment, there's really no indication that he would teach you these crazy kung fu moves. And not only do you miss out on the gameplay aspect, you miss out on one of the best cutscenes in the game, because for some reason, many, though not all, of this game's best moments are completely optional to experience. There's a cutscene with Tarman that comes to mind. But I would be remiss not to mention the Ghost Mech bikes. Accepting this suborder from the Ghost Hunter will bring you to a dilapidated roadside that mysteriously reconstructs into a floating circuit on which you do vehicular battle with these marauding ghost bikes. And it's another miraculous case of something completely absurd, rendered badass in its execution. Was it a little clunky? Yes. But it beautifully combined my love for driving the roads in the rain with the newfound high-octane excitement of this game's combat. And overall, this game frequently rubber-banded back and forth between being amazing and being painfully dumb, or worse, boring. And I won't get too deep into it, but the story plays a large part in it being dumb and boring. But in that way, my experience was similar to the first game. Death Stranding 2 is like Death Stranding 1, but more. For better and for worse. Overall, I'm happy with what Kojima Productions have done with this game. But if I could make one change, well, I'll just let this clip speak for itself. The ball's in your court, Kojima. I'll be waiting. Anyway, thanks for watching the video. I hope you enjoyed it. If you did, leave a like, leave me a comment. Let me know what you thought about Death Stranding 2. Sorry for being late. I work very slowly. If you really liked the video, share it with a friend, and maybe check me out on Patreon. And I think that'll do it. I'll catch you in the next one.